Today's gospel is one of those that can cause us some trouble, some confusion perhaps, wondering about who was Jesus? When did Jesus know? And what did Jesus know? It can rock the foundation of the divine Jesus as the perfect human. Why, you ask? Jesus seems to learn something in today's gospel. He seems to change his mind about his ministry or vocation. Right? Jesus and the disciples, we are told, head to the district of Tyre and Sidon, well outside Jewish territory. A Canaanite woman, a non-Jew, a Gentile, follows them, shouting after them for Jesus to heal her daughter. But she's not shouting in an ugly or disparaging way. She said, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." She refers to Jesus as Lord and Son of David. She's being respectful. Jesus ignores her. It is the disciples who seem like they've had enough. Send her away, they plead with Jesus. They make it sound like she has given way to stalking. And so Jesus says, and it's not clear whether he's saying this to the disciples or to the woman, or both. Jesus says, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." He's clearly saying, I'm not here for the Gentiles. Jews only need apply. And she persists. She kneels before him and says, "Lord, help me." And here it actually gets worse. Jesus says, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." So read children here as children, house of Israel. And Jesus has just called this woman, kneeling in front of him, begging for him to heal her daughter, a dog. He has just called her a dog. She's not going to give up. "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." I have to imagine Jesus looking shocked at this moment, maybe taking a step back, eyes wide. She knows Jesus is rejecting her, but somehow she knows that God's economy is not scarcity. God's economy is abundance. God's love, God's kingdom is not intended just for a few. It is all God's creation. All humanity is God's handiwork. Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed. This aha moment for Jesus, this healing of Jesus' bias, is framed in the Gospel of Matthew with the feeding of the 5,000 in the chapter just before this event, and the feeding of the 4,000 almost immediately after this event. The feeding of the 5,000 is in Jewish territory, and the feeding of the 4,000 is in Gentile territory. You see, this event has led Jesus to share communion with the Gentiles as well as the Jews. So we may be left wondering, did Jesus come from the womb pre-programmed with everything he would need? With all knowledge and understanding? Well, how could he if he were fully human? Of course, the Christian tradition has said that Jesus is fully human and fully divine. We know what it is to be fully human. We make mistakes. We have to learn things. We can't tell the future. We don't know what it is to be fully human and fully divine. Today's gospel seems to point to one of Jesus' more human moments. And in the end, he gets it right. There is more than enough of God's love to go around. It interests me immensely that this gospel today is paired with the reading we got from Romans. Before this reading, where we start today, Paul has been giving some reasons why his fellow Jews have not jumped on the Jesus bandwagon. Then we get the beginning of today's reading. Paul writes, "I ask then, has God rejected his people? By no means." He then describes his own lineage, and then he states that God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. In verse 26, which is not in our reading, Paul tells us all Israel will be saved. And then Paul continues, "For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. For God has imprisoned all in disobedience, so that he may be merciful to all." So Jesus, in the gospel, Jesus appears to be getting the message that his ministry is bigger than the house of Israel, that the Gentiles are to be included. At the same time today, Paul is telling the new church, mostly Gentiles, don't assume that the Jews are outside salvation. They are God's people in covenant with God. God will take care of God's people. It's interesting that the script is the same, but the perspective is flipped. Both Paul and Jesus here are pointing, saying God's plan for salvation is bigger than you can see or imagine. Jesus realizes God's love is not scarce, but abundant, and all people, Jews and Gentiles, are God's beloved children. Paul is telling the church, don't assume that you are in and the Jews are out. We've all been disobedient, haven't we? We will all be dependent on God's mercy. As soon as we decide or think we know who is in and who is out, we have built a box of our own making and put God in it. God's love is abundant, and there is no one outside God's love and mercy. I remember overhearing a conversation in seminary. These two folks, both of whom way smarter than me, they were having a discussion about whether hell existed. And the one said, well, I sure hope hell exists, because I don't want to get up there, okay, maybe an assumption, but I don't want to get up there to the banquet table and sit down and find Adolf Hitler sitting next to me. And I thought to myself, yeah, me either. What he said. And then the other one said, but if you did, what would that say about God's power, God's desire, God's ability to redeem anyone and anything? Booyah! Suddenly I was like, yeah, I want that God. I need that God. Disclaimer here, I'm not saying there isn't a hell or that Hitler is in heaven. All right, just reporting a conversation. Obviously, I don't know, but I do know that for some reason, that conversation has stuck in my mind all these years. In our Old Testament reading today, we hear about redemption, the end of the Joseph saga. Joseph reuniting with his brothers who just last week, in our readings, sold him into slavery. In spite of the brothers' evil intentions, God can use that and turn it into something good. May you never underestimate who are God's people. And may you know and feel yourself loved and adored and included in God's ongoing process of redemption of all humanity, all creation, drawn home to the fullness and ever-abundant love of God. Amen.